Hi, this is Nancy Hendricks, and I'm speaking to you from the Lifelong Learning Institute of Hot Springs Village. Today is a cloudy, foreboding October day, and it certainly does feel like Halloween. The Lifelong Learning Institute wants to present this treat, hopefully not a trick, for our community members, and I like to call it Spirits of the Spooky Season. And this is taken from my new book that was just released this month. It's called Haunted Histories in America, True Stories of the Nation's Most Feared Places, which can be found on Amazon.com. So settle back and let's tell some spooky stories. Who believes in ghosts? Many people do, claiming that they've seen them, heard them, or at least had a feeling of being watched by them. Sometimes it takes place in an obvious spot like a cemetery at midnight. At other times it might be a room at a historic inn or hotel where a previous guest met a sudden violent death. Theaters are especially prone to alleged hauntings with the high degree of emotion, superstition, drama, and ego that often takes place in the darkened surroundings of a playhouse. After all, the bare on-stage light bulb that is always left burning when a theater is empty is called the ghost light. Sometimes hauntings are said to occur after lives are lost in accidents or tragedies, or when someone sets out one day as usual, only to vanish, never to be seen again. Occasionally, an entire town is said to be haunted, especially if it's one that bears a certain kind of history, like Deadwood, South Dakota, or Salem, Massachusetts. Sometimes they're ghost towns from the past, and sometimes they're a modern-day ghost town, like the abandoned community of Centralia, Pennsylvania, consumed by unending plumes of smoke pouring out of the ground, which some people say resembles the portals of hell. The living hell of bloody battlefields like the Little Bighorn or Cold Harbor in the Civil War often leads to stories of their being haunted by the spirits of young soldiers who perished amidst the terror they must have felt when taking their last agonized breath. A famous photo at the Library of Congress illustrates the tragedy of Civil War battles like Cold Harbor, showing not only skulls from unburied young men who fought and died there, but also a foot with an intact shoe and a pants leg still attached. If their ghosts truly haunt the place where they died, it is hard not to feel their humanity. Hauntings are often said to happen in places where there was tragedy or violence, and this is nothing new. There have not been many times in human history when the world was free of fear, famine, disease, war, natural disasters, or man-made catastrophes. While the United States has been blessed with remarkable bounty since its inception, there have also been times when life in America was a struggle for many. When tormented lives ended in death, it was usually not the kind of happy ending that allowed them to rest in peace. The ghosts of enslaved people and those who were convicted of witchcraft are said to wander restlessly, seeking vengeance. Spirits of the dead are also believed to walk when housing developments are built atop sacred Native American burial grounds or strip malls on Civil War battlefields. Perhaps if ghosts do exist all around us, they're there to remind the living that those events are part of our collective history. As humans, we tend to like stories, and we're intrigued by things that are unexplained. If they come to us in terms of the personal lives of real people like us, so much the better. After all, the reason that there are so many haunted houses is because that's where people live their lives, comfortable in their day-to-day existence until something happened to change all that. Since such life-changing moments usually happen in the blink of an eye, Often their souls do not rest in peace in the afterlife, preferring to return to happier times in happier places. Ghostly tales are hardly a modern phenomenon. In the book Mosses from an Old Manse, published back in 1846, early American writer Nathaniel Hawthorne states, and I quote, "Houses of any antiquity in New England are so invariably possessed with spirits that the matter hardly seems worth alluding to." Hawthorne's sentiment is shared by many. It's also worth noting that Hawthorne was in a position to know. His great-great-grandfather was a judge at Salem's witch trials in 1692. By the time Hawthorne and his witch-hunting ancestor came along, belief in the supernatural had been firmly established in human history for eons. Ghost stories with very similar themes can be found in such diverse ancient cultures as China, Egypt, Greece, India, Mesopotamia, and Rome, as well as the Celtic lands of Ireland and Scotland, and the indigenous cultures of the Americas. When the Western world's dramatic tradition emerged, some of the most important plot points in ancient theater involved ghosts. Classical Greek dramatist Aeschylus utilizes ghostly figures, most memorably in the Eumenides, featuring the ghost of Clytemnestra. Supernatural beings were found in Roman drama like Seneca's Agamemnon, but the Romans also expanded roles for ghosts into comedies by casting them in farces like Mostelleria by Plautus, with the Latin title actually meaning haunted houses. Shakespeare's plays were awash in ghosts, such as those in Julius Caesar, Macbeth, and Richard III, as well as the superstar of Elizabethan drama, the Murder King's ghost in Hamlet. In literature, ghosts of the Victorian era stepped into starring roles in books like Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, which could hardly exist without its ghoulish figures. Writing around the same time as Dickens, the Gothic horror novels of Edgar Allan Poe set the gold standard. In modern times, technology really enabled haunting as entertainment. The first American depiction of the supernatural on the screen took place as far back as 1897 with George Albert Smith's The X-Ray Fiend, followed by his 1898 film Photographing a Ghost. Movies focusing on the supernatural were enormously popular from the start. Cuddling in the dark, girls could squeal and snuggle closer to their boyfriends who assumed the role of protector, calming her fears, although he probably harbored a few of his own. A very small sampling of just a few hit movies over the years with the word ghost in the title include the movie Ghost, Ghostbusters, and The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. Other Hollywood frights can be found in such films as The Amityville Horror, Beetlejuice, The Blair Witch Project, The Haunting, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Poltergeist, The Shining, and Sleepy Hollow, to name a mere fraction. When it comes to ghosts, television rose to the ghoulish occasion early, from its humble beginnings to the current time. In the year 2019 alone, a glance at the lineup for just one channel that used to broadcast sunny travelogues is revealing. It's now jam-packed with green screens and dark places, attesting to the popularity of such programs as The Dead Files, Ghost Adventures, Ghost Bait, Ghost Stories, Haunted Case Files, Haunted Live, Haunted Things, Haunted USA, Kindred Spirits, Most Haunted Towns, Most Terrifying Places in America, My Ghost Story, My Haunted House, Paranormal 911, Paranormal Caught on Camera, Paranormal Survivor, Portals to Hell, and these woods are haunted. Now that's just one channel. Supernatural spirits are media darlings on other networks as well. For those who enjoy the great outdoors away from movie multiplexes and television screens, an entire niche of the travel industry has emerged: dark tourism. In many places, word of horrific habitués has been found to increase paying attendance at haunted sites and on ghost tours that explore them. Visitors in search of dark shadows can apparently find restless souls haunting all 50 states, from Alabama to Wyoming, including Alaska and Hawaii, along with the District of Columbia. There's everything from the turmoil of battlefields to the eerie peacefulness of so-called health spas that turn deadly. There are said to be ghosts on the premises at various locales, including pirates and prisoners, librarians and lighthouse keepers. There are said to be spirits haunting familiar sites like Ford's Theater, where Abraham Lincoln was shot, and Ellis Island, where the ancestors of many Americans arrived. Neither Broadway nor Hollywood is exempt from alleged demonic denizens. And speaking of Hollywood, some of the haunts themselves have become movie stars. These include Georgia's Bonaventure Cemetery and Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, Colorado's Stanley Park Hotel in The Shining, and the Grand Hotel at Mackinac Island, Michigan, which was seen in the movie Somewhere in Time. Possibly because of the proliferation of ghost reality shows on TV, thoughts about the supernatural are currently in vogue. Many people truly have had experiences they just can't explain. Some have seen eerie lights, have heard mysterious sounds, have felt strange sensations that they believe could only have been an encounter with the paranormal. Humans have a need to know why things occur, and when an explanation is not readily at hand, many feel the reason may be the presence of the supernatural. In addition, many people are comforted by the thought of life after death. For those who believe in an afterlife, it's logical to assume that the spirits of those who departed from this life are still among us. As for the glut of movies and television shows about the supernatural, many people simply find the idea of the spirits of the dead to be thrilling. Some believe ghosts are not evil, just lost souls searching for closure or justice from beyond the grave, or are trapped between spheres and trying to cross over to the afterlife. Reasons might range from lack of a proper burial, suicide, tragedy, unsolved murders. Other possibilities. Perhaps the spirits are seeking redemption. Or perhaps they're pursuing revenge for past wrongs. On the other hand, some believe that certain ghosts return to spots that were special to them, places where they might have felt especially happy. Some might be seeking a kind of do-over, the chance for things to work out differently after death than they did in life. So to answer the question of who believes in ghosts, the response might be paraphrased from a quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln, whose own ghost has been said to walk among us. Who believes in ghosts? Probably all the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time. Regardless of the era in which we live, and to what degree ghosts are in vogue, it would appear that belief in the supernatural has been with us since earliest human history, and is likely to stay that way for the foreseeable future. You know, the Lifelong Learning Institute of Hot Springs Village is located in the state of Arkansas. Many of our residents here in Hot Springs Village have come to us from various places around the nation and some around the world. Many are from right here in Arkansas, but Very few of them know a lot of the mystique that this state holds. For this next section, I'd like to talk about the haunted spirits and spooky stories of the state of Arkansas. We'll start out looking at something that has a long history. These are health spas and healing resorts. Back in ancient Greece, therapeutic baths were advocated by Hippocrates himself, the father of Western medicine. The Roman baths were a common indulgence for citizens of ancient Rome. Many believe the word spa itself comes from a small Belgian village called Spa, where hot mineral springs were used by ancient Roman soldiers to treat battle wounds and aching muscles during the reign of Caesar Augustus around the time of Christ. Classic European spas like Baden-Baden and Marienbad in Germany catered to the upper classes. Local spas were popular in colonial America, as well as after the American Revolution. Commercial enterprises sprang up where bathers could eat, drink, and find comfortable lodging. By 1815, Saratoga Springs in upstate New York was booming, soon offering more than 500 rooms available to accommodate health seekers year-round. By the 20th century, Americans were traveling to such spa cities as right here in Hot Springs, Arkansas. In some places where there were no warm therapeutic springs, no healing water bubbling from the ground, there were other ways to make money with the lure of good health. For example, in Arkansas, known for many years as the land of opportunity, there were those who considered it a place with opportunities for a profit through any means possible. Arkansas was considered on the fringe of civilization even after becoming a state in 1836. Those who hoped that statehood would improve Arkansas's image as a violent, lawless frontier found instead that subsequent events confirmed that violent image. Purported health cures mushroomed around Arkansas, with little in the way of regulation. One man opened a so-called clinic in the state capital of Little Rock that promised to restore male potency by transplanting the organs of goats into the genitals of patients, many of whom died from the ordeal. Presumably the goats did not do well either. Located in the scenic, remote northwestern part of the state, Eureka Springs, Arkansas boasted of having healing waters, but they were cold springs and they were spread out all over town. In 1886, Eureka's 5-story limestone Crescent Hotel offered with superior accommodations. However, to compensate for financial losses in the off-seasons of fall, winter, and spring, in 1908 it opened the Crescent College and Conservatory for young women. One young lady fell or jumped from a window, and some guests at the Crescent Hotel these days have seen her misty apparition at the window, wearing a long white gown. But the Great Depression brought more financial struggles to the Crescent Hotel. In 1937, a man who called himself Dr. Norman Baker turned the Crescent Hotel into a health resort where he painted virtually everything purple, and he claimed he could cure cancer. Historians call Baker one of many. The dozens of doctors who came to the area, some of which were more reputable than others. Baker's mailings boasted the world's most beautiful health spa, where sick folks get well without operations, radium, or X-ray. That slogan on his mailings came to the attention of the postal inspectors, but as advertising it was effective. Today's Crescent Hotel website states, "Many came, many were treated, many died. For 3 years, desperate patients came for a cure, only to find pain and suffering, the loss of their life savings, and often the loss of life. One patient, Lula Tunis, was brought to Baker's establishment by her husband John, who was desperate to find some way to save her. After months of so-called treatments that ranged from pathetically ineffective to horribly painful, Luna Tunis died. John Tunis testified in court against Baker, at which point it was discovered that Baker had absolutely no medical training and was simply a charlatan who preyed very profitably on desperate people. His so-called health resort at the Crescent was found to be a hoax. The assistant U.S. attorney is said to have quoted Baker as saying that he could, quote, reap $1 million out of the suckers in this state. Baker was convicted of mail fraud and imprisoned at the federal penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, from 1941 to 1944. At his trial, Baker appeared enraged rather than remorseful. He wanted to be seen by the world as legitimate. He blamed the American Medical Association, or what he called organized medicine, for his downfall. Today, some say his vengeful spirit haunts the Crescent Hotel. He is said to wander around the old recreation room at the foot of the first-floor stairs. One recent guest reported hearing the sound of a squeaking gurney in the halls. Another, who saw a ghostly nurse pushing a gurney down a hallway and through a solid wall, was said to have been unaware of the building's past history as a cancer treatment center. Along with the doomed patient, Lula Tunis, the ghost of fellow cancer victim named Theodora has been spotted in room 419. Much of the paranormal activity that haunts the Crescent Hotel can be traced back to Baker's activities in the building, especially in areas just over the old morgue and a walk-in cooler where he kept cadavers. There have been reports of guests suddenly turning pale, falling against the wall, and sliding down in a dead faint. This loss of consciousness among recent guests is usually brief, but investigators say the phenomenon might substantiate the hotel's reputation for the paranormal, especially when it was discovered that the area in which people fainted was directly above the former morgue located in the hotel basement. Investigators are often quick to point out that while many paranormal phenomena can be explained, some cannot. In the case of modern-day people fainting at the Crescent Hotel, it only seems to happen at one particular place, the location that sits directly above Baker's infamous morgue. The Crescent is sometimes called America's most haunted hotel. Yet Baker's dubious legacy is not the only source of hauntings. Just before the hotel opened in 1886, a construction worker named Michael was killed when he fell onto a beam located atop room 218. Today, guests have reported seeing full-body apparitions in room 218, feeling strange sensations, and hearing unexplained noises. Some say Michael's spirit remains, perhaps like any good workman, wanting to complete the job. Another reportedly haunted place in Arkansas is the Allen House in the town of Monticello. It was built in 1906 for the family of businessman Joe Lee Allen. Not only has the Queen Anne Gothic mansion been called one of the most beautiful houses in the state, it is also one of the most haunted. At least one member of Allen's family apparently refused to leave. Allen's daughter, Liddell, moved to Memphis, Tennessee after marrying, but was later granted a divorce. In 1944, both her son and a beloved sister died. Amidst rumors that she was an alcoholic, Liddell returned to the Allen house, where she occupied the master suite. There, on Christmas Day of 1948, she drank cyanide, dying a few days later. After the funeral, which was held at the Allen house, her room was sealed by the family, and that's how it remained until 1956, when the house was subdivided into rental apartments. Tenants began reporting paranormal experiences, like one resident who developed photographs he had taken of the house and found a clear image of Liddell in one of the mirrors. Another couple claimed to have seen Liddell's ghost in a closet. Quickly shutting the closet door, they heard the sound of girlish giggling. When a retail shop was opened on the first floor, the storekeeper returned to open the locked shop on several mornings to find things missing or in disarray. Subsequent residents heard the sound of footsteps in the unoccupied upstairs floors and crying from the empty rooms. In 2009, new owners reported finding about 90 of Liddell's love letters from 1948, the year she killed herself, suggesting that the course of true love did not run smooth. Let's go back to Eureka Springs. Dating to 1905, the Basin Park Hotel in Eureka Springs joins its neighbor, the Crescent Hotel, which we spoke about a moment ago, in providing accommodations apparently for spirits in residence. Commonly cited ghosts at the Basin Park Hotel include that of a young woman who is described as translucent, having steel blue eyes and blonde hair that some say resembles cotton candy. A little girl sporting pigtails and a yellow dress sometimes appears, as well as electromagnetic readings by investigators in room 519 of the Basin Park Hotel that seem to be of a man lying in the center of the bed. In addition, there are frequently what are said to be unexplained orbs of bright white light in the darkened, empty ballroom of the Basin Park, swooping and diving with no apparent source. The ballroom seems to be an especially attractive place for spirits to gather, perhaps reliving merriment from the 1920s when the Basin Park Hotel was a popular Prohibition-era speakeasy. Paranormal investigators have had the sense of a particularly strong presence in the hotel's basement, where the underground cave was a storeroom for bootleg whiskey. Perhaps a case of spirits attracting spirits. The Gurdon Light in Gurdon, south of Little Rock, is a mysterious glow floating above isolated railroad tracks outside town. Its blue and white light, tinted with a kind of orange refraction, is said by some to look like lantern light. The Gurdon Light is seen to sway back and forth, usually on dark, overcast nights. First sighted during the 1930s, two legends that both involve railway workers have sprung up about the origin of the light. One is that a railroad worker accidentally fell on the tracks and was decapitated by an oncoming train. Now he's said to be swinging his railway lantern along the tracks, looking for his missing head. The other legend involves an actual murder, given added weight by the Gurdon Light's first sighting, occurring soon after the crime was committed. In 1931, railroad foreman William McLean fired a worker, with one newspaper reporting that McLean had accused the man of causing a train accident. After the accused man beat McLean to death, the murderer was tried and executed in 1932. Soon the light appeared, with locals theorizing that the light is McCain's ghost, haunting the tracks where he died prematurely, violently at the hands of his murderer. But being a good supervisory foreman, McLean is still on the job, swinging the lantern he would have carried for work. The movement of the Gurdon light is indeed reminiscent of the characteristic swaying of a railwayman's lantern. With the lonely stretch of track outside Gurdon still used by the railroad, on a dark night, the story is not difficult to believe. The Judge Parker Courthouse in Fort Smith was the Hall of Justice for Judge Isaac Parker, often called the hanging judge, whose strict sentencing condemned about 80 people to hanging. Although he died in 1896 after over 20 years on the federal bench, Judge Parker may still dominate his old courthouse by haunting it. There have been reports of an unexplained mist in his courtroom, accompanied by the smack of a gavel, along with the sounds of men yelling, women crying. One observer described the apparition of a man in dusty clothes being dragged away by two men with badges. Notorious for his strict code of justice in some high-profile cases, and sometimes clashing with the Supreme Court, the U.S. Congress reduced his jurisdiction in 1896. Parker, who died 2 months later, may have appealed that ruling by refusing to leave. A groundskeeper at the Fort Smith National Cemetery, where Parker is buried, reported leaving the graveyard on a cold December evening when he heard the sound of footsteps behind him, crunching on the icy winter grass. Swinging around, his flashlight revealed an old man with white hair and a white beard, wearing an old-fashioned black suit. The old man stood staring and moving his mouth as if to speak, but made no sound. The groundskeeper realized he could see through the old man. Being familiar with the images that he had seen at the Fort Smith Museum, the groundskeeper clearly recognized the old man as Judge Parker. The King Opera House in Van Buren played a role in a doomed love story as tragic as anything on the theater's stage. Still in operation, the playhouse dates from the late 19th century, when it attracted traveling troupes of performers. One young actor who was part of a theater company presenting a play at the King Opera House around that time fell in love with the young daughter of the town doctor. She returned his affection, and the couple planned an elopement to avoid her disapproving father. The young actor went to Van Buren's train depot to buy tickets so they could leave town. But the doctor discovered their plan. Racing to the depot in his horse-drawn buggy, legend has it that the enraged doctor whipped the young actor to death. But even dead, the young men have still portrayed the Romeo and Juliet storyline, because his spirit is said to have returned to the King Opera House. There, employees state that they can not only feel that there is someone in the room with them, but have also experienced lights going on mysteriously. In addition, there have been reports of apparitions dressed in a top hat and Victorian-era coat with a long cape. Perhaps the young actor, hoping to spot his long-lost love in the audience. Here in Hot Springs, Arkansas, with its magnificent Victorian bathhouses along the grand promenade of Bathhouse Row, it's awash in history, including the haunted kind. With Bathhouse Row and its elaborate spa buildings designated a National Historic Landmark District, it's easy to feel in tune with spirits of another time. Local businessmen quickly learned that bathers needed something to do when they dried off, and they provided entertainment for them. The old Malco Theater was once the home of vaudeville shows and other productions like a 19th century traveling magic show. As the story goes, the musician asked for a volunteer, selecting a young woman named Clara Sutherland. After placing a silk sheet over her as part of the act, he commanded her to disappear, which she did. But when he commanded her to return, the stage remained empty. No matter how hard he tried, the now panicked magician could not bring her back. No one ever saw or heard from her again. Today, the glowing image of a woman is often seen in the theater's basement, where disembodied voices and the sound of a woman crying can be heard. Some believe it is Clara trying to reappear. With Hot Springs being the home to famed illusionist Maxwell Blade, perhaps he might be able to provide the right cue for Clara to return from her lengthy disappearing act. The Monte Ney ruins are found near the North Arkansas town of Rogers. Most of what is left of a once thriving resort community lies underwater, submerged as a result of the creation of Beaver Lake by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1964. But from 1901 until 1936, Monte Ney was a popular 320-acre health resort that was owned and operated by a colorful character named William Coin Harvey. Coin Harvey said that the name Monte Ney meant mountain water. On its spring-fed lake, he installed picturesque gondolas that met guests as they disembarked from their train. Today, the long-abandoned resort has become a local legend, similar to the mythical Scottish town of Brigadoon that appears only when conditions are right. At Monte Ney, just a scarred concrete tower and some building foundations remain on dry land, which are eerie enough. But when the lake waters are low due to drought, a submerged concrete amphitheater appears to rise like an apparition out of the depth. The general spookiness of the Monte Ney area has given rise to what some consider hauntings, but others call them well-worn urban legends. Periodically, local newspapers record encounters with the girl they call Dear Darla. This is the spirit of a girl who was allegedly attacked after leaving a party at Monte Ney one night. She was reported to have run screaming through the woods toward the road. But even after a search of the area, she was never seen again, at least not in human form. Bentonville, Arkansas is not only home of the home office of mega retailer Walmart, but also the Peel Mansion, which was built in 1875 by former U.S. Congressman Samuel Peel. The home is now said to be haunted by both Samuel and his daughter, Minnie Belle. The apparition of Samuel Peel has been seen in various parts of the house, apparently keeping an eye on his property to this day. Minnie Belle was an accomplished pianist in our life and apparently saw no reason to stop practicing the piano after death. Reports indicate that she can be seen wandering around the Peel Mansion in a white gown, as well as producing the sound of ghostly piano music in an otherwise empty room. Longtime Bentonville residents state that before the mansion's restoration, it looked like a stereotypically spooky spot. Some called it the House on Haunted Hill. We hope you've enjoyed some of these spooky stories for the spooky season. This has been Nancy Hendricks, and I've been bringing you stories from my latest book, Haunted Histories in America, True Stories of the Nation's Most Feared Places, which can be found on Amazon.com. For spooky stories, historical tales, and some interesting insights into the land that we now call home here in Hot Springs Village, Arkansas, please come back regularly to the website of the Lifelong Learning Institute of Hot Springs Village, which can be found at hsvlli.org. Thank you for being with us today, and happy Halloween.